Hi, welcome to Walking and Talking Spirituality. I'm Brian Russell. You know that old saying, when the student's ready, the teacher appears? It's really interesting. I was having a conversation with my kind of coach and mentor this past week, and he said, have you ever looked at the metaphor that Bernard of Clairvaux uses about being a reservoir over against being a canal? And I hadn't, so got on Google and I searched Bernard of Clairvaux, and it's from the Song of Songs commentary or series of sermons that he preached. And I looked up reservoir and canal, and I found it in sermon number 18 that Bernard of Clairvaux preached, and it's really profound. And I'd encourage you all to check that out if you've never looked at it. But think of that metaphor as leaders, as persons that want to be ambassadors of abundance for the gospel. Do we serve and minister as reservoirs or canals? Clairvaux saw this as a key distinction, and he actually turns it really into a warning. Because think of the difference. A reservoir captures water, and it's always full, and it only serves the population out of its overflow of abundance. So picture a reservoir on top of a hill that fills up with water. The water only comes down the hill after it's already filled. And then think about a canal. And what he meant by a canal was the idea that a canal doesn't flow out of abundance. The canal just simply, as soon as it gets water in it, it immediately flows right through it. And I think that's an excellent question for us. Do we actually serve and live and breathe as reservoirs of God's abundant love through the work of the Spirit? Or do we try to minister essentially in our own strength? The second we have something, we immediately empty ourselves of it. Because there's danger there, right? Sometimes we have a sense of a compelling call about what God's mission might be, but instead of making sure that we're actually fully in touch with God, we turn our work of ministry into really our own work, and that's what really living as a canal is. So how can we be reservoirs? Again, there's a lot to be said about this, and I do really encourage you to check out Bernard of Clairvaux, Sermon 18 on the Song of Songs. It's short, it'll take you 5 or 10 minutes to read it. But what do we need to do again? It's about, not so much about doing, it's about being. And so much of this series that I'm trying to do, Walking and Talking Spirituality, is trying to open myself up and think through my own life. Because I know that for many times in my own life, maybe even years, that I was more of a canal than a reservoir. Just kind of, as soon as I got a breath of God in my life, I immediately breathed it right back out. And that's a helpful metaphor, because obviously we can't hold it all in all the time. But we have to make sure that we're overflowing with abundance, or ultimately we get into a position where, I remember Bill Hybels saying one time, the work that he was doing for God was destroying the work that God wanted to do in him. So how can we be reservoirs? Again, it's to make sure that we follow our rule of life. Again, not as some kind of a work. Because we're not talking about works righteousness. We're not talking about trying harder, because ultimately the spiritual life is about opening ourselves up to God's grace and allowing God to fill us up to the brim. And so out of an overflow, God's love pours out for God, for neighbor, and even ourselves. It's interesting that Clairvaux in a sermon even warns that some people try to make up for their lack of being a reservoir, their lack of real connection with God, by trying to love their neighbor more than they love themselves. That's why over the last few years, I've been trying to do what I call a deep dive spirituality and pursue that. Open myself up. Let the Lord get into every little nook and cranny of my life. And again, I'm not claiming perfection on any means, but I want to be all that God created me to be. And I know that it's going to take growth. So, what do? I try to follow my rule of life. One of those things is I'm out walking. When I get back home, I'm going to sit down with scripture and do some reading. Not as a work, but simply because I know that when I'm in the scriptures, it's not just about me reading the scriptures. I'm trying now to let the scriptures read me. Then I'll do 20 minutes of centering prayer. Spend time with silence with God. Then I'm going to pull my journal out. I'm going to write down at least 5 things that I'm grateful for. I'm going to be real attentive to how I feel on the inside and try to capture whatever's bothering me today, if there is anything, and in a way of putting down on paper. It's a way of really surrendering it to the Lord and trusting that God will help me work that out. And then I'm going to live my day. And one of the things I'm going to try to do today, to try to do every day, is with God's help, out of that connection, I'm going to try to be an ambassador of abundance to every single person that I meet each day. But as I'm walking out here, I got to ask myself the question, is that more aspirational, or am I going to be able to do that naturally as a reservoir of God's abundant love? Or am I going to try to do it out of my own strength and be a canal? What about you? Are you a reservoir or are you a canal? I'd love to talk with you about it, but anyway, thanks for taking a walk with me this morning. Again, I'm Brian Russell, Deep Dive Spirituality, and I look forward to seeing you next time or hearing from you in the comments.